Hello, my name is Stephanie Ishii, and I'm a senior associate with the consulting firm Hazen and Sawyer. I'm here today to present the findings of a regional water study as related specifically to Logan County. The regional study evaluated the adequacy of water resources and associated infrastructure across central Ohio throughout a 25-year planning horizon. The project was conducted by the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency and the Ohio Department of Natural Resources in partnership with the Ohio Water Development Authority. The detailed modeling and analyses were conducted by the hired consulting team led by Hazen and Sawyer. While the overall project considered water resources and infrastructure throughout the 15-county study area, this presentation will focus exclusively on the analyses and findings that are specific to Logan County. The agenda for this presentation includes the following sections: an introduction to the study and its objectives, a discussion of the current and future conditions that were evaluated as part of this project, a presentation of the needs analysis of current and future water supply, demand, and treatment capabilities. The resource gaps and potential project options section identifies areas where existing developed water supply and infrastructure capabilities are insufficient relative to projected future needs. Insufficiencies are referred to as gaps. For each gap, potential project options will be presented. We will also discuss opportunity areas that have been identified. These are areas where existing water supply and/or infrastructure capabilities will exceed projected future demands. In other words, these are areas where there's a surplus of water resources and/or infrastructure capacity. Lastly, water quality. We will close with a discussion of projected changes to water quality throughout the planning horizon. Projected water quality impacts were developed based on projected changes to residential development, industrial development, and temperature and precipitation conditions. Let's begin with a high-level introduction to the study. The Central Ohio Regional Water Study was completed for a 15-county area, as shown on the map. The overall goal was to quantify current and future water-related needs within the region and to identify areas with water-related gaps and surpluses. The study evaluated water-related needs that span drinking water supply, drinking water treatment capacity, wastewater treatment capacity, receiving water capacity, and water quality for the years 2030, 2040, and 2050. Four key project objectives were identified for the Central Ohio Regional Water Study. The objectives included, first, improve, maintain, and optimize resources while planning for growth. Results of the model were used to evaluate opportunities to secure safe and reliable water supply for public use, consider reuse water for non-potable needs, and identify areas of capacity limitations. Future solutions were required to maintain beneficial use of water required for recreation, wildlife, and economic growth. Second, identify opportunities for collaboration and regionalization. The project created a dashboard planning tool that will serve as a focal point for collaboration between utilities and state agencies, helping to ensure best use of both water and financial resources. Third, maximize funding impacts through sustainable infrastructure improvements. Using the analytical capabilities in the dashboard, state agencies can now and will in the future be able to help identify funding to build the infrastructure needed to meet the long-term needs for the region. And lastly, identify future needs. The project also provides information to the state agencies on how stormwater and surface waters will be impacted by the growth and development that's projected. The project can be used to identify opportunities to help mitigate impacts of development on the environment. The focus of this presentation will now shift to a discussion of the current water resource conditions in Logan County. This section will also include an introduction to the modeling that was completed for the evaluation of the overall water resources throughout the project area. An integrated water resources model was developed to evaluate the available water supply, water demands, wastewater demands, and other uses of water throughout the region. The integrated model includes several components that are all connected to one another as outlined in this graphic. Surface water, along with reservoirs, and groundwater supply feed either directly to water demands or feed a water treatment plant. That water treatment plant in turn supplies water demands, including the local population, golf courses, industries, and a myriad of other uses. These water demands then go to a wastewater treatment plant where the water is treated and returned to surface water or groundwater supplies. The water resources model developed for this project attempts to track all of the water uses in central Ohio and determine if sufficient water supplies exist for projected growth. The model evaluates if there is enough treatment capacity, if all demands can be met, and if wastewater treatment plants can treat the projected influent flows. The model was evaluated for the entire 15-county region. This presentation will focus on the current and future supply and demand for water resources in Logan County. Groundwater availability was estimated at the Huck 10 watershed level. Huck 10 is the size of the hydrologic area used in the model. To explain, Huck, or HUC, stands for Hydrologic Unit Code, and the 10 stands for the number of digits that follow that hydrologic unit code. The U.S. Geological Survey has delineated each of the watersheds in the country and assigned them a specific number based on their location, similar to a zip code. The system identifies drainage areas into regions, 2 digits, subregions, 4 digits, basins, 6 digits, subbasins, 8 digits, watersheds, 10 digits, and subwatersheds, 12 digits. The map reflects the Huck 10 watershed level, and watersheds in Logan County are labeled and shown on the map. There are 5 Huck 10 watersheds shown on the map. For each of the watersheds, the average daily sustainable groundwater availability was estimated. These values are shown in units of MGD, or million gallons per day. It's important to note that the groundwater is not uniformly available across the entire watershed or Huck 10. The color shading on the map indicates the recharge capability, with darker shading reflecting areas with higher recharge where groundwater may be more plentiful. One daily groundwater availability value was assumed per Huck 10 watershed, and all groundwater users within that Huck 10 were assumed to share that amount of groundwater. Groundwater supplies in Logan County range from 3 to 10 million gallons per day for a given Huck 10. Across these watersheds, an estimated total of 30 million gallons per day can be sustainably withdrawn from Logan County groundwater sources. With respect to groundwater availability estimates, there are a few disclaimers about the groundwater approach that should be noted. First, scale. This study estimates total groundwater availability in each Huck 10 watershed as a single value, which makes its predictive capability only suitable for very large-scale assessments. These results are not suitable for site-specific analysis or any groundwater investigations besides those at a regional or sub-regional scale. Second, delineation. Aquifer boundaries do not always coincide with overlaying surface water systems. In this study, groundwater boundaries are defined by surface watersheds, and consequently, some aquifers may be split by unsuitable borders. This may lead to unexpected or misleading results, especially near watershed boundaries. And then lastly, uncertainty. Groundwater maps and studies always involve a high degree of uncertainty due to the complex nature of aquifers and the lack of widespread, reliable data sets of aquifer characteristics and water level information. While this is not unique to this study, its scale and time frame make its groundwater availability estimates especially uncertain. Site-specific groundwater investigation could mitigate these uncertainties. Surface water availability is the cumulative sum of surface water from all watersheds in the county. However, surface water availability will vary for each stream location. Logan County is estimated to have approximately 40 million gallons per day, or MGD, of total surface water availability. It should be noted that surface water availability estimates are shown on this slide for raw runoff estimates and do not include modeled wastewater flows that are added to the streams. The surface water supply value is the minimum monthly average value for the current condition. Adding both groundwater and surface water supplies together, it's estimated that Logan County has roughly 74 million gallons per day of total available raw water supply. This supply availability is nearly split between groundwater and surface water, with slightly more available surface water. Supply availability at the sub-county level varies by location based on aquifer yields and surface water tributary area as presented on the previous slides. The next focus for this resource evaluation was the existing and future demands that draw raw source water from the available raw water resources. Data on water demand was developed using population data, which was available on a regional basis. The information on current county population was obtained from MORPC, the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. These population data were used to further calculate water demand. The map on this slide is a heat map indicating the current estimated population distribution within the county. This estimate is for the year 2021, which is the year that the current conditions are based on. Areas in the blue tones are more densely populated, while the yellow tones indicate a less densely populated area. The darker areas in the county indicate the population in the Bellefontaine and Indian Lakes areas. This map shows the assumed utility service areas for the county. Water demands were calculated for each utility using service area boundaries, the population within the service area, and recent historical water production data reported to the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency. A per capita water use was calculated for each service area. This is calculated by taking the water production data and dividing by the assumed population within the service area, which resulted in a per capita water use of gallons per person per day. This per capita water use includes all types of users within the service area, whether it's residential, commercial, or industrial. It's important to note that in future conditions, no surface area expansion was assumed, and water per capita use for each utility was assumed to stay the same. This means that growth in projected population would also mean a proportional growth in commercial and industrial demand within the utility service area boundary. For future water demands, the per capita water use was multiplied by the assumed future population within the service area. The total calculated water demands for the county are shown in this pie chart, categorized by type. In total, the water demands are 9.75 million gallons per day in the county for the 2021 current condition. The largest portion of the demand is shown in dark blue, which is labeled as municipal demand. This demand is approximately 3.1 million gallons per day and is based on the population and utility boundaries discussed earlier. It should be noted that each demand can be served by either a public or private utility. The next largest demand is industrial demand, then followed by private water system demands and commercial demands. Current commercial, residential, industry, agricultural, and seasonal demands are based upon recent water withdrawal data that is reported to the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. All of these various demands draw water from the available surface and groundwater resources. The municipal portion, which represents the largest water demand, also has an associated wastewater component. The wastewater flow component in the county includes the return flow or used water from the service areas in addition to an inflow and infiltration component, or INI, which was estimated and included in the total wastewater flow. For the current condition, the maximum annual average wastewater flow is approximately 4.7 million gallons per day at the county level. The annual average wastewater flow was analyzed instead of the maximum month flow as was done for drinking water. This is due to the wet weather impacts observed in wastewater due to the inflow and infiltration impact. During rain conditions, areas with combined sewer systems could see very high flow rates, while during dry times only the base flow is observed. High rainfall in a single month could skew the average. Therefore, an overall annual calculation is used to determine if a particular plant is nearing its permanent treatment capacity limit on the wastewater side. The existing demands and flows can be compared to the existing infrastructure within the county. In Logan County, there are a number of water treatment plant facilities, and their total capacity is 7.5 million gallons per day. All of that source water is pooled from groundwater. Remember that the total maximum daily water demands across all types within the county is about 9.8 million gallons per day. So in the current conditions, the county does not have sufficient treatment capacity to provide treated water to meet all demand types. However, when analyzing only the municipal water demands, there is sufficient water treatment capacity at the county level. From a wastewater treatment plant capacity standpoint, the county has 10.2 million gallons per day of permanent capacity at the existing facilities across the county. The current maximum annual average wastewater flows generated by the demand and inflow and infiltration are about 4.7 million gallons per day. Therefore, the existing county infrastructure is sufficient to meet the current wastewater flows. With an understanding of the current conditions in the county, the next step was to expand the analysis and explore potential future conditions. This study evaluated conditions in 2030, 2040, and 2050. When analyzing future conditions, current data is projected from the present to a future point in time. With that projection comes uncertainty, which is why analyzing multiple potential future scenarios can provide more resiliency and reduce the risk of failure. Scenario planning acknowledges that there are several possible and plausible future conditions that may occur and allows planning for several possible future conditions. On the left side of the cone, there's only one point because concurrent conditions are known. As time goes on, the cone of uncertainty expands and the range of possible future conditions widens. The widening could indicate divergence among scenarios and changes in the recommended projects that align with that scenario. Analyzing several scenarios, or plausible futures, helps ready the region for ending up in futures A, B, or C, and knowing the projects to implement along the way. 4 model scenarios were developed to define the range of potential futures. Scenario conditions that were explored were 2 different precipitation and temperature changes and 2 different population estimates, totaling 4 different model scenarios. The different inputs of each of these scenarios will be explored further on the following slides. 2 population sources were used for the scenario modeling. The expected growth trend was informed by MORPC, the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. The MORPC population projections were informed by local zoning and land use plans. The historical growth trend was informed by the Ohio Department of Development, or ODOD. The ODOD population projections were informed by historical birth, death, and migration trends. The population projections were used to estimate the future increases in municipal water demands and private water system demands over time. The bar chart on the left shows the different county-level growth rates between 2020 and 2050 for the 2 population sources. The table to the right shows the future estimated total Logan County population for each of the 2 projection sources. The MORPC estimate results in a slight population increase, and the ODOD estimate results in a slight population decrease. Municipal and private water system populations are assumed to change over time based on the 2 population estimates that were just described. The left graph shows the municipal population over time for both population estimates, and the right graph shows the private water system population over time for both population estimates. The municipal population are the people assumed to be served by a utility. The private water system population are the people assumed to be outside of a service area and have self-serving groundwater wells. The private water system population makes up a slightly larger portion of the population for the county, meaning more people in the county are assumed to not have water served by a utility. The expected growth trend estimate assumes a population increase over time for both municipal and private water system populations, and the historical growth trend assumes a population decrease for both demand types. These 2 heat maps show the current and future estimated population distribution within the county for the expected growth trend, or the MORPC growth trend. The left figure shows the current 2021 condition, and the right figure shows the future 2050 condition. Comparing the 2 figures, there's a minor change in population projected. Current and future land use data were also provided by the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, or MORPC. The left image shows the current 2021 land use condition, and the right image shows the future 2050 land use condition. The land use categories match that of the National Land Cover Database. For the current condition, a large portion of the county is pasture or hay land use, with various areas of development, particularly around the Indian Lake and Bellefontaine areas. Over time, very few land use changes are estimated. Another element of the scenario modeling are the different temperature and precipitation scenarios projected associated with climate change. Historical precipitation and temperature data from 1983 to 2022 were used to estimate the surface water runoff and evaporation. For the future conditions, change factors were applied to the historical precipitation and temperature data to analyze the effects it may have on surface water availability. Temperature and precipitation changes were based on the global climate model data downscaled to the Central Ohio area. There are different change factors for each month and future planning year, those years being 2030, 2040, and 2050. Change factors were extracted from an ensemble of 49 global climate models from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Two scenarios, climatic condition scenarios, were selected for evaluation of future conditions: a moderate climate scenario and a hot and dry scenario. The moderate change scenario represents the middle of the road and uses the 50th percentile change factor for both precipitation and temperature from the ensemble of global climate model data. The left graph shows the 50th percentile change factors for precipitation, and the bottom left graph shows the 50th percentile change factors for temperature. As can be seen, there's a greater change projected for temperature over the planning horizon than precipitation. The extreme change scenario that was modeled is the hot and dry scenario, which uses the 5th percentile change factor for precipitation and the 95th percentile change factor for temperature. The top right graph shows the 5th percentile change factors for precipitation, and the bottom right graph shows the 95th percentile change factors for temperature. A scenario with no temperature and precipitation change relative to historical observations was also evaluated. The two temperature and precipitation conditions affect the future raw water supply availability, as shown by the horizontal orange arrow on the slide. The two different population projection estimates affect the future water demands, as shown by the vertical blue arrow on the slide. 4 model scenarios, all with different supply and demand conditions, were developed to reflect potential future conditions as shown in the graphic above. The intense pressure scenario includes the 5th/95th percentile temperature and precipitation change factors and the expected growth population estimates to inform water demand. The full speed ahead scenario consists of 50th percentile temperature and precipitation change factors and also still the expected growth population estimates and associated water demands. The easy does it scenario consists of the 5th and 95th percentile temperature and precipitation change factors and the historical growth trend for population estimates and associated water demand. And then lastly, the resource abundance scenario includes the 50th percentile temperature and precipitation change factors and again the historical growth population estimates that inform water demand. These 4 scenarios allow for planning of different supply and demand conditions and what they might look like and how those conditions compare to the infrastructure that is needed. As discussed, the different temperature and precipitation scenarios will impact water supply availability. In the model, the surface water supply availability was changed based on the assumed temperature and precipitation change factors. However, groundwater availability values were unchanged based on these change factors. The graph shown here shows total supply availability before any demands for both surface water and groundwater over time are taken out for both of the change scenarios. Generally, the extreme change scenario, hotter and drier, results in less available surface water over time and therefore less available total raw water supply. This bar chart shows the assumed future water demands over time in Logan County broken up by type. As shown previously, current demands are mostly municipal, industrial, commercial, and private water system demands. For future demands, agricultural demands become more of the total demand by 2040 and continue to be a large portion of the demands throughout the planning period. The assumption for future agricultural demands will be discussed in more detail on the following slide. Ohio State University was consulted about assumed increases in future agricultural irrigation water demands. It's estimated that by 2040, agricultural fields will need at least 5 inches of irrigated water during the critical growing season, which is between July and September. Based on this information, the team reviewed future land use to identify where agricultural fields are expected to be in 2040 and in 2050, and calculated the water demand that would be needed for 5 inches of irrigation across those agricultural areas. These irrigation demands are present for 2040 and 2050 condition and are assumed to use groundwater for their source water. Based on the assumed irrigation needs discussed on the previous slide, the agricultural demands were increased by 33 MGD at the county level for 2040 and 2050 conditions, shown by the circled dark gray bars on this graph. It should be noted that this irrigation demand is only during the critical growing season of July through September. With respect to infrastructure assumptions in Logan County, no future new or increased water or wastewater treatment capacities were assumed for Logan County. In this section, we will discuss water resource and related infrastructure needs at the county level. This graph shows combined surface water and groundwater supplies in orange, the maximum month municipal water demands in light blue, and water treatment capacity in dark blue over time. Because the demands are less than the water treatment plant capacity and less than the raw water supplies for all of the years within the planning horizon, the treatment capacity and raw water supplies are sufficient to meet municipal demands at the county level. In this graph, the demands represented by the light blue line now include municipal demands plus private water system demands. The raw water supplies and water treatment plant capacity at the county level are sufficient to meet this combination of municipal and private water system demands over time. Now, the non-municipal demands, except for agriculture, have been included in the solid and dashed light blue lines. The demands shown in the light blue line include municipal demands, private water system demands, and all non-municipal demands except for agriculture. Raw water supplies are sufficient to meet demands, but water treatment plant capacity is not sufficient to meet these demands at the county level. However, many industrial demands in the county pool groundwater and are not served by municipal water treatment plants. Therefore, water treatment plant capacity is sufficient to meet municipal demands. When assumed agricultural irrigation demands are added in, the raw water supplies at the county level are still sufficient to meet demands, but the water treatment capacity is not sufficient to meet the water demands across these various types at the county level. The demands surpass the water treatment plant capacity in the base year. However, assumed agricultural demands are not expected to be served by municipal water treatment plants. This slide presents similar information but related to wastewater treatment plant capacity. On this graph, the annual average municipal wastewater demands for the expected growth trend are shown in light blue, and wastewater treatment plant capacity is shown in dark blue at the county level. Existing wastewater treatment capacity is sufficient to meet future municipal demands at the county level. The previous section evaluated supply and infrastructure availability relative to demands at the county level. This following section will address resource gaps and abundances when you consider where those supplies, infrastructure, and demands are actually projected to occur within the county relative to each other. The dashboard planning tool that was created as part of this study helps users visualize resource gaps and resource abundances over the planning horizon. The nodes on the map, or the circles on the map, are color-coded by type and are sized based on how large of a gap or how large of an abundance they represent. If a node is filled in red, that indicates that it represents a gap. Gap definitions are as follows. For a surface water node, it's a gap if any shortage is observed throughout the planning horizon. For a reservoir node, it's designated as a gap if its usable storage ever falls below a 20% threshold. For a groundwater node, it's a gap if its remaining groundwater amount on a given day ever reaches zero. For a water treatment plant, it's a node that will look like a gap if its projected maximum month average flow ever exceeds 80% of the permitted capacity over the planning horizon. And then lastly, for a wastewater treatment plant, it will be designated as a gap if its projected maximum annual average flow ever exceeds 100% of its associated permitted capacity. This table summarizes the resource gaps within the county for each scenario and model year. There are at most 3 gaps within Logan County for any given year and scenario for the entire county. All identified resource gaps in the county are related to raw water supply and not related to infrastructure. These gaps will be explored further on subsequent slides. Findings in the subsequent slides reflect the expected growth and moderate temperature precipitation change condition for 2040. The 2040 full speed ahead scenario was selected as the target planning scenario to allow stakeholders to assess the current and future project needs without extending too far into the future, while also using reasonable temperature and precipitation projections. The following slides will provide detailed discussion of the potential projects that could fill identified water resource and infrastructure gaps within the county. The next phase in the project focused on identification of opportunities and strategies to fill resource and infrastructure gaps that are available for viewing by way of the dashboard. Gaps can be filled through a variety of ways depending on the type of gap. For example, a supply gap can be filled by constructing a new reservoir or implementing a policy to restrict use during times of low supply availability. Other solutions include expanding treatment capacity and leveraging reuse water. Gaps are often filled with a project or by a set of projects. A gap or a set of gaps can be filled with a variety of ways and can exist across one or multiple model scenarios. A scenario scorecard was developed to assess the favorability of a project used to fill a gap. 5 scorecard criteria were developed to evaluate projects compared to each other as indicated on this slide. Scenario applicability assesses if a project will fill a gap across one or more scenarios. The more scenarios it addresses, the better, because it means the project is relevant across multiple potential future conditions. Similarly, but a little different, within the same scenario, a project that fills more than one gap is considered to be more favorable because it achieves multi-objective optimization. Life cycle costs are another important consideration. The total life cycle costs include construction, operation, maintenance, and other projected costs. The water quality impact criterion considers impacts associated with development as well as changing water and wastewater use. A project that provides higher protections to water quality is considered more favorable. And then finally, a project with a shorter implementation timeline would be considered more favorable because the benefits of that project can be realized sooner. The next few slides provide solution strategies for the 2040 full speed ahead planning scenario. Note that findings on the resource gaps were previously discussed and can be further explored using the dashboard planning tool. The dashboard facilitates exploration of gaps across model scenarios and whether a given project option is relevant across scenarios. Although we're focusing on the 2040 full speed ahead model scenario, project options presented here generally address gaps beyond this one scenario. Pre-planning level projects are provided as examples and possible solutions to fill gaps. Additional efforts are needed to define, plan, and implement a project as outlined in next steps. Further detail on the gaps are provided in tabular format on the next slide. Overall, project options have been categorized by type into one of 3 categories. The first is a local category. This involves utilities largely using their own assets to fill a gap or an industry providing its own on-site solutions. The second category is a regional project options, where utilities collaborate with other utilities. And the last category is a reuse category, where utilities leverage reuse water to provide non-potable water to industrial users to reduce potable water demands. This table provides detailed information on the projected resource gaps in the 2040 full speed ahead planning scenario for Logan County. There are 3 groundwater shortages projected in the county, including groundwater supplies associated with the Headwaters Great Miami River, the Bocangales Creek, Great Miami River, and Headwaters Mad River, Huck 10s. A key finding is that the water and wastewater treatment capacity is generally sufficient based on the rated capacity of the treatment plants and projected growth. The predicted limited groundwater supply could affect local agriculture, municipal, and private water systems. Logan County is predicted to have a significant increase in agricultural demands for water by 2040, resulting in projected shortages to the groundwater supply. These shortages can be partially addressed through water reuse using reclaimed water from nearby wastewater treatment plants instead of groundwater as the irrigation supply. However, this is dependent on policy development and other considerations. Alternative solutions include policy restrictions on source water use and exploring other alternative supply sources as opposed to groundwater for irrigation. The agricultural community should also be engaged to confirm that the assumptions within this model for agricultural irrigation demands in 2040 and beyond are indeed accurate for Logan County. This next section will present the evaluation conducted to determine areas of opportunity, which are defined as areas where there is assumed modeled surplus in capacity with respect to either the source water or infrastructure. It should be noted that this section only identifies potential areas of opportunity. Project planning and utilization of surplus capacities will require further evaluation and discussion with local municipalities and stakeholders. First, let's discuss water supply areas of opportunity. Raw water supply sources in the county have opportunity for growth. There is surface water opportunity on the southern portion of the county, specifically in the Great Miami River and Mad River. There's no groundwater opportunity in the county as current groundwater supplies are already stressed. Next, let's discuss the areas of opportunity or surplus resource with regards to water and wastewater treatment infrastructure within the county. Bellefontaine has remaining wastewater and water treatment plant capacity, as shown here on the planning dashboard, though if that additional water treatment plant capacity is to be fully leveraged, source water to the plant should be also assessed. Indian Lake WPCF has available wastewater treatment plant capacity, providing some opportunity for additional wastewater treatment. In this next section, we will present the project findings related to projected water quality across the planning horizon. While the Central Ohio Regional Water Study was primarily focused on water supply and infrastructure capacity, the models developed were also used to project potential impacts to water quality that may occur due to changes in population, land use, infrastructure, and climate. The goals for the water quality assessment were to 1. Characterize existing water quality conditions. The study identified watershed with the highest existing water quality. Such pristine watersheds were considered to be the most sensitive to future development. 2. Determine potential impacts. The study developed potential impact factors based on available data and the suite of possible future scenarios, including those evaluated for water supply and treatment. 3. Watersheds were characterized as having higher or lower potential for impacts based on the identified impact factors. The scenarios use a wide range of future conditions, so the intent here is to illustrate where there's more likely water quality impacts given the uncertainty over the exact future conditions that will happen. And then lastly, 4th, provide recommendations and activities that can be completed by local agencies, utilities, and organizations to help offset, mitigate, and protect against water quality degradation. The graphic illustrates the approach to characterizing existing water quality and understanding the potential for future impacts. Those watersheds having both high existing water quality and high potential for future impacts should be considered as the highest priority for action. Watersheds throughout the region were characterized using the following 3 metrics. 1. Quality of aquatic habitat. It's a standardized metric for measuring the quality of aquatic habitat at a specific location within a stream. The average QHEI score in a watershed was calculated to determine the overall aquatic habitat score. 2. Targeted water quality standards. The aquatic life use designation as well as anti-degradation tiers provide a listing of streams that are targeted to remain high quality. These are assigned to stream reach for each Huck 12 watershed. The REACH categorizations for anti-degradation and aquatic use designations were evaluated to determine an overall categorization at the watershed level. And 3, stream biological health. The Ohio Environmental Protection Agency has performed modeling to estimate the potential biological health of headwater streams based on land use factors and desktop analyses. This modeling generated an estimate for all of the headwater streams in each watershed. A summary categorization of the results was applied to each watershed based on all of the stream reaches within its boundary. Given the above factors, an overall water quality category was applied to each HUC 12 watershed, ranging from poor to excellent. For Logan County, the majority of the watershed scored as good or excellent, with a few small exceptions. 4 factors were used to determine the potential for future impacts to water quality. First, land use. The population and land use projections provided by MORPC were used to estimate the overall change in the percent imperviousness of the watershed as estimated to occur by 2030, 2040, and 2050. Literature data has shown that increased impervious area in a watershed is typically correlated with decreasing water quality. As impervious area increases, the overall stream water quality tends to decrease. Second, hydromodification. When streams see higher flows and/or more frequently occurring storm events, stream banks may experience increased erosion. With these flow changes, streams may become incised or disconnected from floodplains, resulting in a decrease in water quality and increase in suspended solids. Third, increased occurrence of low flows. During dry weather conditions, healthy streams may typically maintain base flows to support aquatic life. If the low flow periods are extended or flows are projected to be lower under future conditions, it could have a negative impact on water quality due to loss of aquatic habitat and could therefore lead to more restrictive permitting requirements. And then lastly, temperature and precipitation. Changes in temperature and precipitation were considered in multiple scenarios. The stream model was again used to evaluate the impact of temperature and precipitation conditions during low flows. In some watersheds, the impact of temperature and precipitation on stream flows was found to be more significant due to lower flows during dry conditions that were not able to be offset through either wastewater treatment plant effluent or increased runoff. The potential land use impacts on water quality were evaluated based on projected changes to both population and land cover. The population and land use projections were provided by MORPC. The data were used to estimate the overall change in percent imperviousness within each watershed. The colors shown here reflect the absolute percent increase in impervious area. Thus, a 5% increase in impervious area would indicate that the total percent imperviousness in the watershed would increase from 10 to 15%, for example. Literature shows a strong correlation between stream conditions and the percent imperviousness for a watershed. As the percent impervious increases, water quality tends to decrease, particularly in areas without appropriate setbacks, mitigation, or stormwater controls. The second factor previously mentioned is hydromodification impacts. When streams see higher flows and/or more frequently occurring storm events, stream banks may experience increased erosion. With these flow changes, streams may become incised or disconnected from floodplains, resulting in a decrease in water quality and increase in suspended solids. A stream model was developed for the entire 15-county study area to simulate stream flow from runoff as well as from wastewater treatment plant infrastructure. Future scenarios were developed that examine the impact of changes in population, land use, and temperature and precipitation on projected flows. 40 years of simulated stream flow were analyzed to determine the impact of different future scenarios on projected flows. Flows from the model were used to determine which watersheds may have a higher potential for channel modification due to changes in flows. Watersheds shown here in dark blue have a higher potential for future hydromodification impacts based on the regional watershed model. For watersheds with a downstream modeled link, any of the watersheds that saw a 10% or higher increase in projected flows during frequently occurring storm events were designated as having a higher potential for hydromodification. The watersheds with the lower potential may still experience hydromodification in isolated instances, but changes are not projected to be as significant given the range of forecasted scenarios. The third factor is increased occurrence of low flows. During dry weather conditions, healthy streams may typically maintain base flows to support aquatic life. If those low flow periods are extended or flows are projected to be even lower, it may have a negative impact on water quality and lead to more restrictive permitting requirements. The stream model was used to simulate stream flow from runoff as well as from wastewater treatment plant infrastructure. Future scenarios were developed that examine the impact of changes in population, land use, and temperature and precipitation on projected flows. 40 years of simulated stream flow were analyzed to determine the impact of these different scenarios on projected flows. Flows from the model were examined, and evaluation of flows during the driest period was conducted to determine which watersheds may have a higher potential for water quality impacts due to decreased base flows during drier periods. Watersheds in the dark purple color have higher potential for future water quality impacts and more restrictive permitting requirements related to increased occurrence of low flows. For watersheds with a downstream modeled link, any of the watersheds that saw a 10% or greater decrease in projected flows during low flows were designated as having a higher potential for water quality impacts. The watersheds with a lower potential for low flow impacts may still experience impacts due to drier conditions in isolated instances, but changes are not projected to be as significant or as widespread given the modeled results and the range of forecasted scenarios. As noted, these areas are not indicative of any potential water supply or availability concern, but instead indicate areas where low flows could impact habitat and permitting requirements. The fourth factor is temperature and precipitation. Changes in temperature and precipitation were considered in multiple scenarios. The stream model was again used to evaluate the impact of temperature and precipitation conditions during low flows. In some watersheds, the impact of the changing temperature and precipitation on stream flows was found to be more significant due to lower flows during dry conditions, especially areas that were not able to offset low flow through either wastewater treatment plant effluent or increased runoff. The model was used with 40 years of simulated stream flow to determine the impact of the different scenario conditions on projected flows during drier periods. In some watersheds, the impact of temperature and precipitation on stream flows was found to be more significant due to lower flows during dry conditions that were not able to be offset through wastewater treatment plant effluent or increased runoff. The watersheds shown here in the darker blue have a higher potential for future low flow impacts due to temperature and precipitation change. A high impact, i.e. hot and dry temperature, and precipitation scenario was compared against a medium impact temperature and precipitation scenario. For the high impact scenario, if the base flows were lower than those in the medium impact scenario, then the watershed was flagged as having higher potential for water quality impacts due to temperature and precipitation conditions. In some cases, high temperature and precipitation impacts were found to be slightly offset through increased wastewater treatment plant effluent discharge or additional runoff from impervious areas. Overall, these areas flagged as high potential for temperature and precipitation impacts are those areas that may be slightly more vulnerable to temperature and precipitation changes. All of the watersheds experience some impact in flows due to the changes in temperature and precipitation. The Central Ohio Regional Water Study Dashboard can be used to examine individual watershed characteristics and to identify watersheds with excellent water quality and/or high potential for future impacts. Those watersheds can be considered and prioritized for protection, conservation, restoration, and other activities. Some potential mechanisms are available for water quality protection. With potential water quality impacts identified, considering water quality protection is the next step. Water quality protection is a critical part of any water resource plan. It's important to understand that stream systems are constantly changing due to a number of factors, including vegetative communities, adjacent land uses, and changing temperature and precipitation. The magnitude of change over the next few decades will vary across the region and is subject to several variables. Current development plans indicate that development pressure is being increased in areas that are rapidly developed. Proper protections should be in place prior to development and significant land use changes in order to protect local water quality while supporting economic development. Proactive watershed engagement may reduce or eliminate negative impacts of development on water quality. 4 categories of solutions should be considered, including policy, partnerships, data, and funding that could be used to help offset or mitigate any potential future water quality impacts. Based on the findings of this study, there are some key locations that would benefit from prioritized protections. While all protective measures should be initiated across the region, immediate focus should be directed to protecting the high water quality watersheds with a high potential for future impacts. With respect to water quality protection mechanisms, there should be routine review of local ordinances. Local ordinances should be revisited on a routine basis to ensure they adequately address the changes the region is facing. In general, policies should be revisited on a routine basis to ensure that they align with one another, are well supported with responsibilities delegated appropriately, and adequately protect natural resources. Riparian setbacks protect riparian buffers that reduce runoff and pollutants. Floodplain requirements ensure adequate space is available during storm events for systems to overflow their banks without flooding infrastructure. Stormwater management plans lay out best management practices for reducing stormwater runoff. Zoning and planning codes restrict development to certain areas, and in doing so can be used to protect valuable resources. Tree codes can encourage strategic planting of native and temperature and precipitation resilient trees, which compose riparian buffers and promote stormwater infiltration rather than runoff. Fee rates established for the Planning Commission and the SWCD should be reviewed to ensure that they adequately support proper review. These ordinances may be implemented at various levels, in which case a designated authority should be tasked with inventorying where the policies are and are not in effect, and to encourage collaborative efforts. The county should push to have NPSIS or NPSIS plans in place as early as possible. NPSIS plans are defined at each of the HUC 12 watershed levels. There are 33 HUC 12 watersheds completely or partially located in Logan County, of which 5 have an Ohio Environmental Protection Agency approved NPSIS plan in place. Depending on when TMDL plans are estimated to be complete, one may need to consider fast-tracking NPSIS plans in order to be eligible for 319 funding and to help define and prioritize projects. The NPSIS is a living strategic planning document that summarizes causes and sources of impairment, establishes critical areas, identifies quantifiable objectives to address causes and sources of impairment, and describes projects designed to meet those objectives. The NPSIS is designed to evolve as projects come and go and will need to be reevaluated periodically, similar to the regulations mentioned above. And then lastly, MS4 compliance. NPDES permits are routinely updated. Every 10 years, urban areas, or UAs, are redefined by the Ohio EPA based on census data. The next census will be in 2030. Communities need to be prepared if they are close to reaching that threshold. Communities can consider the eventual need for separating permit administrative duties as communities approach UA definition. Communities can consider adopting additional regulations for areas experiencing rapid development that are not within a defined UA. Communities can ensure that plans and resources are in place to support adequate preparation and review of an increased number of PTI and NOI applications. Communities can ensure resources are in place to support increased number of SWPPP reviews and construction site inspection. And then lastly, communities can also educate themselves and associated stakeholders on grant funding and other mechanisms available to support compliance with local water quality initiatives. MS4 communities can leverage a NPSIS plan to meet permit requirements by identifying watershed-specific strategies and projects that improve water quality. By integrating data collection efforts from NPSIS plans into MS4 compliance activities, municipalities can improve regulatory efficiency, strengthen funding opportunities, and enhance water quality improvements. With respect to water quality protection mechanisms, strengthening partnerships between municipalities, watershed organizations, and other local governmental agencies is important. Communities don't need to work alone. Planning efforts are typically developed with input from state and local agencies, watershed groups and nonprofits, soil and water conservation districts, and universities and research institutions. By coordinating efforts with these stakeholders, communities can collaborate to get together and coordinate current issues and upcoming plans. Collaboration may include meeting regularly to discuss trends, projects, and upcoming plans. This can be outlined in stormwater master plans and can be expanded upon to involve additional stakeholders to discuss overall watershed action items. One can invite guest speakers to learn about new opportunities. Representatives from existing partnerships or outside agencies can share success stories, lessons learned, and upcoming opportunities for projects and funding. Collaborating data collection and permit review responsibilities to ensure responsibilities are delegated appropriately and that all partners have the resources they need to carry out said responsibilities can also come from this stakeholder engagement. Data can be shared and linked through GIS to improve accessibility, efficiency, and data gap identification. Communities can also increase community engagement and participation with existing watershed partners to create a network of support for managing water quality challenges. For example, support programs that provide training on data collection for monitoring water quality indicators. Citizen scientists can help collect valuable data and observations. This helps engage and inform the community. Communities can facilitate educational opportunities with the public through outreach and trainings. Utilize NPSIS plans to identify partners and outreach resources. Communities can host a platform to collect public observations and concerns. This is useful for monitoring spatial changes over time, as well as for identifying key areas of concern for community members. Still within the vein of water quality protection mechanisms, it's of course important to monitor water quality. Local data collection efforts can be bolstered through training and certification programs. More specifically, monitor developmental impacts. Implement long-term monitoring programs to assess the cumulative impacts of population growth and development on water resources. Educating communities about the importance of water conservation and pollution prevention can encourage responsible behavior and involve communities in data collection in a great way to encourage grassroots efforts to be taken hold. Use these monitoring data to inform revisions to watershed management plans and policies, ensuring that they reflect current and future challenges posed by the population and growth. Also, digitize records. Encourage the use of GIS viewers to store available data collected by various governmental and public entities. Digitize existing record drawings and georeference new development records as they are constructed. Ensure data are collected equitably across the county, focusing on watersheds with high-quality features and those experiencing ongoing issues or areas adjacent to or downstream of new development. And lastly, a few comments on public reporting. Collect observations of flooding, erosion, and general water quality, and store records digitally for analysis and reference. This will help identify areas of concerns that are being felt by the community. Share monitoring results with the public and stakeholders to increase transparency and accountability. The figure shown is a screenshot of some of the layers of the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District that they make available to the public on their GIS viewer. Red dots show public reporting of flooding. Storm sewers are depicted and attributes from records and inspections are stored. Attributes including pipe size, material, depth, and age are readily available and spatially referenced. Inspection data can be tagged for assets for tracking purposes. Department of Health IDDE sampling locations and results are also available. U.S. stream gauges are linked, as well as ODOT bridge inspection data. Planning studies are identified that include reports and recommendations for the problem areas where available. Prioritize infrastructure upgrades. Secure funding for critical infrastructure such as stormwater management systems, wastewater treatment plant upgrades, and failing septic system replacements to support growing populations. Focus on areas identified as current or near-term gaps. Consider future scenarios to inform planning decisions, and assess regional optimization of services as early as possible. Incentivize sustainable practices. Establish funding programs to encourage developers to adopt green infrastructure or other low-impact development techniques that minimize the environmental impact of new construction. Stormwater best management practices, including bioretention, pervious pavement, and extended detention, can also help improve water quality challenges. encourage redevelopment over new development where possible, proactively identify areas that are suitable for redevelopment. Leverage grant programs. Clean Ohio Green Space funding is available for preserving green space and riparian areas through Clean Ohio, which is part of the Ohio Department of Public Works. This funding can also be used for property acquisition. The Ohio EPA Water Resource Restoration Sponsor Program allows for nonprofit organizations, parks, and municipalities to apply for funding to protect or restore high-quality water resources, such as Category 3 wetlands, or at least warm water habitat life use designation water supplies. It's a competitive annual process that connects recipients with a sponsor. A sponsor is a recipient of a WPCLF loan. Interest from the sponsor's loan ideally pays for the implementer's projects. Additionally, there's Section 319 grant funding for Huck 12s with existing NIPSEs. And then also there's H2O Ohio, which is described on the next slide. H2 Ohio provides funding through H2 Ohio Rivers and H2 Ohio Wetlands. The Rivers program has several grant funding opportunities. Those that are applicable are listed, as well as the coordinating state agency. First, there's the Agricultural Incentive Program. In 2024, Governor DeWine announced a statewide expansion of H2 Ohio producer incentives, making the initiative available for the first time to producers who farm outside of the Western Lake Erie Basin. For the first round of statewide enrollment, ODA offered enough funding and resources to enroll a new 500,000 acres outside of the Western Lake Erie Basin. More than 525 producers in 51 additional counties enrolled in 2024. The program incentivizes farmers to implement science-based, proven best management practices to prevent nutrient runoff and improve water quality. ODA works closely with the county SWCDs to administer participant contracts, provide technical assistance, and support producers. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, and the state of Ohio are partners in implementing a voluntary Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, the CREP, to enroll up to 67,000 acres of agricultural land in the Lake Erie watershed and to enroll up to 70,000 acres of agricultural land in the Scioto River watersheds within the state of Ohio. Participants receive financial incentives from the USDA to voluntarily enroll environmentally sensitive cropland or pasture land in contracts for a period of 15 years. In return for annual rental payments that average approximately $154 per acre, participants may convert the land to native grasses, trees, and other conservation vegetation. There's the Chloride Reduction Grant Program, which is a new partnership between the Ohio EPA and the Ohio Department of Transportation, or ODOT, focused on reducing salt pollution in Ohio's waterways. The H2 Ohio Chloride Reduction Grant Program now offers grants to communities to help them improve road salt storage and handling to reduce salt runoff into Ohio streams, rivers, lakes, and groundwater. Litter cleanup assistance programs are also offered through ODNR. There are equipment grants available. Ohio EPA awarded more than 250 communities across the state a total of $1 million in grants for equipment needed to maintain their public drinking water infrastructure. The grants cover distribution system equipment such as mobile leak detectors, line locators, valve exercisers, flow meters, hydrant condition assessors, pressure monitors, and training to use this equipment. In 2024, a second round of grants were awarded to over 250 communities for a total of $2.2 million. Equipment obtained under the grant must be used to exercise distribution system valves, perform leak detection in the distribution system, for meter accuracy testing. There's also the Healthy Rivers Livery Grant Program through ODNR. The program will support livery owners in removing trash from rivers and addressing long-standing cleanup needs. The grant will support up to $10,000 in costs to clean up Ohio's rivers and streams. Dam removals are also supported by ODNR and Ohio EPA. The H2 Ohio Rivers program is focused on removing low-head dams across the state that have outlived their intended use and are harming water quality through oxygen depletion, trapped sediment, and interrupted fish migration. There's also water infrastructure funding. Ohio EPA, through H2 Ohio funding, has awarded grants for a variety of water infrastructure improvements, including HSTS replacement, collection and conveyance system improvements, and treatment works upgrades. The H2 Ohio statewide wetland grant program is a reimbursement grant program that provides up to 100% project funding for high-quality natural infrastructure projects focused on nutrient reduction and water quality improvement across the state of Ohio. Applicants for grant funding for projects outside of the WLEB are open annually. July 2025 starts. Types of eligible H2 Ohio wetland or natural infrastructure projects include wetland creation, hydrologic restoration of wetlands on hydric soils, hydrologic enhancement of existing wetlands, floodplains, and riparian corridors, stream conservation channel design and floodplain restoration, restoration of forested riparian barriers, acid mine drainage abatement projects, dam removal and associated restoration, property acquisition if associated with water quality restoration projects, and stormwater retention and green infrastructure projects. In summary, the Central Ohio Regional Water Study included an evaluation of projected residential and industrial growth, the associated increased water demand, available water resources and water-related infrastructure, including water and wastewater treatment plants. The study evaluated the adequacy of existing resources and infrastructure to meet projected increases in demand over a 25-year planning horizon, extending through 2050. The main findings for Logan County can be summarized as follows. Logan County is projected to experience residential growth and agricultural irrigation demand growth in the near future. This growth has the potential to put stress on available water supply and related infrastructure. Water resource and infrastructure capacity was compared to projected water and wastewater demands. Future projects were identified to alleviate or offset projected gaps. Project identified as part of this project had been designed as local, regional, or reuse focused to give a range of potential future investments. In addition, areas of opportunity have also been identified, which could lead to regional partnerships and a sharing of resources. As growth occurs throughout the county, plans and pathways for protecting local streams and encouraging sustainable development practices can be leveraged. If you have comments or questions regarding this presentation or the Central Ohio Regional Water Study dashboard or any of the project in general, please refer to the project website for additional resources and for contact information. Thank you very much for your time and interest in the Central Ohio Regional Water Study.